Hello, my name is Joseph Asanio, and I'm a deaf actor and screenwriter. I remember when I went to RIT, I was a film student. I remember I was fortunate to have great interpreters, but that was not the case. I remember when I had film professors who didn't know how to work with deaf students. And I've experienced oppression from the other film students. For example, they thought that, not all, but a few thought that people can't do anything, really. So I've had students who asked me, "We're in film school with us?" I was like, yeah, because film school was very competitive to get in, so it made it sound like that people can't get into film school or something. So I remember I had film professors who would not caption, who would not put on the closed captions for the films, and my professor couldn't turn on the captions, so she called the tech support to come over, but they was like, "Oh, we'll be there in 30 minutes." So the teacher was like, "You know what? Forget it." So she contacted them and she said to my interpreter, "It's gonna be 30 minutes when they come, so I'm gonna have to go ahead with the movie without the caption. So I'm sorry." So she charged me. I'm sorry. I was really upset because I had to watch my interpreter in the dark. And I remember that day when my interpreter was really mad. So she was signing and I could not see a word that she was signing. I was really upset because, really? So, and also, I remember there were other students who were really mean to me because I remember I had to use my voice because I chose to use my voice in the classes. So I remember when there was a forum where the students would comment on the other students' works, and I was practicing my senior thesis, so we have a statement to share with the class. So I remember when I was talking about my senior project in front of a whole class, and one student wrote to me and said, "If I were you, I would have a sign language interpreter next to you, so that way you cannot be afford to be misunderstood." And that comment really hurt me because, I worked so hard on my speech my entire life, and I was really hurt by it. I remember when I was trying to, reach out to the hearing film students and say, "I would like to work with you, but it seems that the hearing students are here and the deaf students here, so there was a big divide between that, and that was hard for me. So I didn't really have a great experience in film school, but I was hoping to learn, from my peers, but I didn't really get that. So I was able to just collaborate with the other deaf students, but I wanted to, work with the hearing students, but they didn't seem they wanted to, even though I tried to reach out to them and say, "I would like to work with you, but they were like, "Oh no, we're good, thank you." It was hard for me. So And also, I remember it was really rough because, I wanted to announce, that. And also, the accessibility services, I was fortunate to have a good interpreters, and I requested for the state laws, to interpret for all of my classes, so that was great. So, and when I was younger, I was from kindergarten to 12th grade. I was fortunate to have great interpreters, and I was able to get the access that I needed. But it was interesting that college, my professor didn't know how to work with deaf students, so that was really different for me. So it was fascinating because I wanted to, learn from the best, because my professors came from the village on streets, and they were hired to come to the school to teach us. So that was that. I did not have the best experience in film school. So there's that. Thank you so much for watching.